It was in Nazi Germany in 1933 that a British girl stepped onto the stage at the Bayreuth Opera Festival to sing in front of the leaders of the Third Reich. She rose to great fame and continued to be a favourite of the regime almost until its downfall. Reviled by her family as a Nazi sympathiser, she was in fact a British intelligence agent. How did a young mill worker from Wigan rise to the heady heights of being Hitler's favourite opera singer? And how did she become a spy, working for military intelligence right up to her arrest by the Gestapo in 1945?
She told me she was an opera singer, to being an opera singer all over the world, but she didn't explain to me the fine detail of what went on anywhere else. I think she was still keeping a lot secret from people at the time.
Marjorie Myers Booth was born in Wigan in 1905. There was nothing special to set her apart from thousands of others, except that she could sing. Aged 15, Marjorie Booth became a member of the Wigan and District Opera Society.
It was the local operatic group that recruited her. I think she borrowed like 2 pence from her mother, once for a penny return fare, and I think a penny for a bun and a cup of tea when she got there. She was just a mill girl, a little mill girl, and she was pushed right to the very, very back. Oh dear, little girl from the mills. Okay, put her over there. Here's a piece of music. Can you sing it? And as soon as she started singing it, they said, "We have got a forthcoming star here."
Her talent won her a place at the Guildhall School of Music in London, where she went to study in 1923. In 1924, she won the Mercer's Scholarship Prize and visited New York, where she impressed a group of German professors. They invited her to visit Switzerland, where she won the coveted Lisa Lehmann Prize, and then to join the Berlin Opera. She won both the Mercer's and the Lisa Lehmann Prizes again in consecutive years. It was during her time at the Guildhall School of Music that she met a young German doctor studying English in London. She eventually married Dr. Egon Strohm in August 1936. Marjorie achieved her first major breakthrough in 1928, when she was selected to sing a solo part in Tosca. From then on, she featured regularly in the famous Bayreuth Wagner Festival.
She was eventually recruited by the Berlin Opera House, and that was her career took off. The little mill girl became a great, great opera star.
By 1933, her reputation and fame was growing, and she found herself performing in front of Germany's new Chancellor, Adolf Hitler, and his colleagues.
Hitler was enamored of her. I think he was entranced by her. And he came round to her dressing room, which is unusual for Hitler, showing a completely different face to Hitler. He came around with 200 red roses wrapped in a swastika flag and presented them to her personally. From that point onwards, she was then given an ex-directory number to contact him at any time, and she was also could get in contact with Hitler.
Hitler invited her to dine with himself and the ex-Crown Prince and Princess of Prussia.
So I went and met Herr Hitler there. They were all very charming, and the ex-Crown Prince and Princess have promised to promote a concert at Potsdam at which I will sing. The ex-Crown Princess was very charming to me and introduced me to her friends as her baby.
In 1935, now an established opera star, Marjorie returned to sing in England with concerts at the Queen's Hall, Wigan, at the Royal Albert Hall as part of the Proms, and then a season at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, where she opened with Wagner's Die Meistersinger. She also sang at the Christie Cancer Hospital, the place where her mother had died some 4 years earlier. She and Egon had planned a wedding in Southport in August of 1936. But due to intense newspaper interest which threatened to interfere with their day, they were forced to cancel their plans and married in secret. They returned to Germany, and by the time war broke out, Marjorie was entrenched in German society, both on the opera stage and in the nightclubs of Berlin. She continued to sing right through the war, much to her family's disgust. Her stepfather, William Fairhurst.
I won't listen to her, even if she does sing. I am so disgusted I shall never see her again. I have no desire to see her.
So far as we know, he never did. However, neither he nor anyone else knew that Marjorie carried a great secret. British military intelligence covertly approached her to uncover her political sympathies. She is reported as stating, "I am as British as a stick of Blackpool rock," and so she agreed to become a spy. This was a secret she kept even after the war had ended. By 1943, the German High Command had built a prison camp on the edge of Berlin, known as the Holiday Camp, where they were believed to be collecting together a group of British fascist collaborators. Invited to sing for the prisoners, it was here that Marjorie met and began to work with John Brown, a rather more famous spy.
John was sent to Germany to be captured. He was being trained so that he would be able to catch traitors. He ended up in Berlin later on in what the Germans called the holiday camp. John got permission as he got more and more trusted, and he gained freedom of Berlin, and he was allowed to go wherever he liked, so long as he came back at night. And he went to nightclubs, and this is where he met Marjorie Booth.
It was in the Berlin nightclubs that John and Marjorie would meet to swap information, sending it back to London via their networks. John's particular trick was to pretend he was drunk and be overly amorous with her.
Once they did it in front of Hitler in the Stalag camp. He came there and she was performing. They embraced for a long time and John just popped it down Marjorie's front and without anyone seeing.
Marjorie carried John's information out of the camp in her underwear, and such publicity as Marjorie's story achieved after the war nearly always referred to her as the knicker spy. Between visits to the camp to sing, where she would wear a dress covered in red poppies, meetings in Berlin nightclubs and occasional trips to her apartment, the two carried on a successful espionage program for over 2 years. Notable successes included exposing the plans for the new Tiger tank and obtaining crucial evidence regarding the treason of William Joyce, Lord Haw-Haw.
The Tiger tank was the big one because he bribed the guard to get in there, and he gave these secrets to Marjorie, and it was bombed not long after. Absolutely wrecked.
As the war dragged towards its end, John Brown was exposed as a spy and was briefly arrested but managed to get back to England. He returned as a war hero, only to die in the mid-1950s from motor neuron disease.
He was an amazingly brave man. I can't believe he took so many risks. But what would it have been if he hadn't done all he'd done, really?
Marjorie was not so lucky. Hermann Goering and his team became more and more suspicious. He is reported as declaring once that this woman has a guilty mind. In 1945, as soon as she was no longer under Hitler's direct protection, she was arrested, questioned, and in all probability tortured. She spoke of her time in Gestapo HQ as being terrible and frightening.
Marjorie was then stripped to her underwear, and literally at the time when they got her down to her panties, which were pantaloons in those days with elasticated, she had shoved them into her knickers, and she defied them and said, "You go any further and Adolf Hitler will hear about this within 24 hours and your feet won't touch the ground, believe me." And the Gestapo stopped.
Marjorie gave evidence at various war trials in London. She had hoped to meet her family again and to revive her glittering career. However, no one would associate with her, and she was left broken-hearted and isolated. In the immediate years after the war, she lived in a safe house in Bayswater along with other former spies. This was Marjorie's last known connection. John Woodford was a cousin of the house's owner, and he came to stay in August 1950.
I was introduced by Elsie to Marjorie Booth. She said, "This is my friend," and she was a spy during the war. I didn't know anything about her other than the fact that she was introduced as an opera singer by Cousin Elsie. She took me around London in her little car and said, "I'll show you Buckingham Palace and the West End of London, Hyde Park." But in those days, with it just being after the war, there was still a blackout system, and they didn't have all the neon lights and everything in London like they used to have.
It was on this short tour of London that John would find out more about Marjorie than anyone else ever had. And through him, we are able to catch a glimpse of the real heroine.
As we passed Buckingham Palace, she was driving, and she actually stopped. In those days, she must have been able to stop outside Buckingham Palace. I don't know whether you can now. But she said, "John, I want to tell you something that I've never told anybody else, ever." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "The people in there are the most wonderful people in the world, the King and Queen of England. England is the most marvellous place, and I'm absolutely dedicated. I've dedicated my whole life to this country." She didn't say that to keep it secret. She just said, "I've never told anybody else, but you're the one I'm telling now."
Shortly after this encounter, Marjorie was offered the chance to go to America, possibly to restart her career, and she took a ship to New York from Liverpool. She would never return.
Cousin Elsie showed me an obituary in the Times newspaper of her and all her activities, and that was the first time I knew exactly what she had been doing over the last few years.
She's an unsung heroine. I think that she should have been given an award, the same as John Brown was at the end of the war, and she's not been recognised. And I feel this is very, very, very much a misadjustment of justice to her. She was, at the end of the day, an honest-to-God, bona fide spy. And how are you going to get close to Hitler unless you're friends with him?
Certain things were kept secret, that she did a hell of a lot for her country, and that we should be very proud of her. She should get one of the highest awards that this country could bestow on her.
Marjorie Booth largely disappeared from history, and her bravery has never been recognised. She was truly a forgotten poppy, one of many, no doubt, but we believe this particular lady's story deserves to be told.